What is definitely not a sign of intelligence, but people think it is? Story 1. Certainty. People who are actually intelligent are aware of how much they don't actually know, so they tend to choose their words carefully and couch their responses with caveats. Less intelligent people perceive this as uncertain or lacking confidence. Answer. I had to train myself to use fewer caveats at work because me saying I can probably do this unfamiliar task that I'm only 98, sure I'll be able to figure out, is perceived as less reliable than this other person saying they can definitely do it, except I know they have a 20 failure rate, or do it so poorly it then falls to someone else, i.e., me, to clean it up. And yet I still regularly find myself thinking, maybe they do know how to do it this time. Story 2. Always having an answer. A coworker would always have a confident answer to any question. Eventually, that eroded any sense that he was curious or pensive or willing to find a solution. He already knew the answer. We started probing with made-up questions or ridiculous things, and he never failed to have a firm and confident answer to some complete bullshit we invented. Glue a light bulb on a brick and he'd say he knows what it's for, and I don't believe that. You give me someone who says, "What the hell is that?" and I'll trust them. Answer. I would suggest that there's a similar but opposite thing, in that if someone says they don't know something but is then pressured on what they think it could be, if they can then come up with a convincing answer, it indicates a certain level of intelligence, mainly because it makes me feel intelligent when I do it, if I'm being honest. For example, I am not an art person, but I am a history person. Was dragged along to a historical art museum by friends who were surprised by the stuff I was saying about the paintings. Eventually, we come to a spot where there is clearly a missing painting. Instead, it's an empty sort of archway with a plug socket in the wall and a skirting board. Was jokingly pressured into what the whole thing represented and came along with a whole spiel about how it was a commentary on power within society, how the wall itself represented society broadly, the socket were the powerful few and the focal point where power actually flows from, and how the skirting board represented the disenfranchised. Honestly, I ended up convincing myself to the point that I'm now upset I didn't take a picture of the, I state again, blank wall. Story 3. Public speaking. Some people can sound like they know what they're talking about, but really don't have a clue. Answer. We have a guy at work who really has a knack for coming across as knowledgeable on any given subject when in fact he is absolutely clueless. Often when he gets transferred from place to place, he initially is trusted with tasks relevant to his job description, but once people realize he has been fudged up constantly, then he needs to be supervised quite heavily. This is a job which relates to safety massively as well. Story 4. Being so strongly opinionated that you never budge on a topic in a debate or change your mind about things. Story 5. The dumbest people I've ever known are incapable of being wrong. The smartest people I've ever known are the ones who know the inevitability of being wrong. And because they've spent years operating under that kind of intellectual humility, they're free to keep learning. They've been able to take the most perspicacious views, the most supportable ideas, and the most recent findings from the smartest people they've ever known and form their own perspectives. If someone can say, "I don't know," and "I think I might be wrong," then that's someone to keep around. Story 6. I think a lot of people misconstrue confidence, quick speaking, and a loud voice with intelligence. It's almost always a show. It's really weird how American culture glorifies that behavior, while slower, more calm and thoughtful speaking behavior patterns are ignored or just seen as weaker. That's just my perspective, though, completely anecdotal. Story 7. I like this Neil Stephenson quote on the subject. The difference between stupid and intelligent people, and this is true whether or not they are well educated, is that intelligent people can handle subtlety. They are not baffled by ambiguous or even contradictory situations. In fact, they expect them and are apt to become suspicious when things seem overly straightforward. Neil Stephenson, The Diamond Age, or A Young Lady's Illustrated Primer. Story 8. A willingness to take advantage of others for one's own benefit is often confused with being highly intelligent. Answer: it's just a lack of empathy. Sometimes people have both, some degree of intelligence and lack of empathy, but this lack of empathy is clearly not an indicator of high intelligence. It's just that in our world, it's the easiest way to gain fortune, by feeding on others. So more often we notice this kind of people who are somewhat intelligent and also a jerk. Story 9. People whose entire personality is based on being contrarian and/or overly critical. Taking issue with everything under the sun doesn't add any weight or make you seem profound. You're just fudge, predictable, and boring. Story 10. Trivial knowledge. I have known people with large trivial knowledge base, but can't understand nor perform simple logic. Intelligence will largely depend on a combination of curiosity, logic, open-mindedness, and what one chooses to learn. TLDR. One could hold all the puzzle pieces, but if you can't put them together, then you're kinda useless. Story 11. Knowing everything. People that are intelligent know that they can't possibly know everything. Stupid people believe they easily know more than anyone else. Story 12. Indubitably, it is, without a shadow of a doubt, an undeniable truth that manifests itself most clearly and unmistakably when an individual chooses to employ excessively wordy, elaborate, and prolix language, replete with an abundance of unnecessary and superfluous verbiage in order to articulate and convey their intended point or message. Why waste time say lot word when few word do trick? Answer: when I studied English at Oxford, sorry if it sounds like bragging, but it is relevant, the main thing the tutors were trying to reinforce in the first term was that good essay writers write clearly. Don't use unnecessary jargon, make your points as clearly and concisely as you can, and avoid mistakes like tautology, misusing terms you don't understand, and writing sentences so long and winding that no one can follow them. So the English language and literature academics at Oxford University think being wordy and prolix makes people sound dumb too. Story 13. Parroting anything people think because they took the time to Google how many licks it takes to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop. That means they're big-brained. Story 14. Mistaking knowledge with intelligence. Like almost all those ask questions to show how stupid people are, don't show people being stupid, they show people lacking knowledge. And ironically, they show the person filming the video lacks knowledge about the meaning of words. Story 15. My grandfather only had an 8th grade formal education and had to drop out to help his father work our family ranching operation. He was the most intelligent man I have ever met. He had what we call horse sense and would point out things to me that would never occur to me to consider. He would do a thing that we call country dumb because he had a strong Texas accent. Underestimate this man's intelligence at your peril. It always worked out in his favor financially. I would watch him in awe. He was wildly successful and very wealthy. He also developed some crop rotation, organic farming. Methods way before they were popular and animal husbandry techniques still in use to this day. The Cattlemen's Association in our vicinity nominated him so many times for Rancher of the Year, they eventually had to exclude him because he always would win. I followed him around like a shadow and I truly miss him. Story 16. Confidence. You can be the most confident mofo in the room and still be the dumbest person they've heard all day. And on the flip side, you can be super shy and be the smartest guy in the room. Story 17. A very specific thing. I learned how to solve a Rubik's Cube, and there would be people that literally thought I was a genius because I was able to pick up one at someone's house or party or whatever and solve it on the spot in a minute. If you learn the basic way to do it, it's just memorizing steps. It has nothing to do with puzzle solving or intelligence. Story 18. Talking about things you don't have any knowledge about. Sometimes the smartest thing to say is, I don't know. Story 19. Being in a leadership role in a company. Often people are moved up for reasons other than intelligence. Length of time at the company, politics, no one else to do it, and/or pure manipulation. Story 20. Asking a boat salesperson when an electric boat sinks if they would rather be electrocuted or eaten by a shark. Story 21. Remembering every detail of a TV show from 10 years ago. It's impressive, but not exactly Einstein-level brain power more, like a mental DVR on overdrive. Story 22. Talking down to people about a subject you know they are not actively studying, devoting a life to. The smartest people in the room are ones who will happily dumb things down, so anyone can join in with thoughts. Stephen Fry, British chap, is the absolute king of this. The man knows so much, is super smart and bright, but doesn't try to bombard people with technical terms, save to educate. He will talk simpler to people so anyone watching can follow it. Story 23. Having a British accent. Seen many people say that when they hear it, they think that the person is smarter. Answer. These stereotypes persist because they're not without merit, i.e., they're often wrong, but they'll beat randomly guessing. The thing with British accents is that the accent you're thinking of is likely received pronunciation or posh British. That's generally spoken by people who received a good education. A good education doesn't magically make you smart, but it stacks the odds in your favor. If you're in America, the Brits you encounter will also be exclusively Brits that can afford to travel to America. Of course, money doesn't make you smart, but it helps with a good education, and being smart helps you to hang on to your money. Hence, you get this meme. Because the average Brit in LA is very different from the average Brit in Ibiza, Spain. Story 24. Being good at chess. A lot of people associate good chess players with intelligence, but in reality, being good at chess has a lot to do with memorization and pattern recognition. Even the top chess players in the world admit that their ability to play chess at a high level isn't an indicator of their true intelligence. Story 25. Contrarianism. It's one thing to have principled reasons for disagreeing with common sense, but it's another thing entirely to habitually take a devil's advocate position on any position. Answer. Is contrarianism the same devil's advocate, though? I've always seen it as being an important difference between the two. Someone contrarian believes the opposite or claims to believe the opposite, often from an emotional reason. Someone taking a devil's advocate position asks questions about the prevailing assumptions so as not to fall victim to groupthink. They also generally don't actually state any opinions. Story 26. Online IQ tests, especially when they aren't even smart enough to understand what their score means. Story 27. Winning arguments. Sometimes people just don't want to talk to you anymore because you're a jerk. Story 28. Knowing a lot of things. You can know a lot and be stupid. You can know nothing and be quite smart. Story 29. Being good at taking tests. Speaking as someone who was always good at taking tests in school, I know people who I think are as smart as, if not smarter than, me, whose levels of intelligence were not effectively or accurately captured by the typical educational system. Story 30. Writing typing sentences like you've just ate a thesaurus in the hopes that you'll confuse the person you're having a discussion with enough to win an argument. Story 31. Playing chess. You often see chess used in movies to signal that a particular character is intelligent because they play chess. Yes, it may encourage strategic thinking and pattern recognition, but is overused as a signal of intelligence. Story 32. Knowing how to speak English. Especially in Asian counties, it's considered a sign of intelligence status. Story 33. Being able to memorize and recite knowledge, especially using big words but being unable to rephrase something to be better understood. It has little to do with intelligence and a lot with memory, yet at school we are taught to memorize info like machines. Story 34. Good grades, no offense, but there are cheaters and Google to help people maintain those, while the smart people bust their butts studying and sometimes barely scrap by with a B. Story 35. Being contrarian without also being constructive. We know nothing is perfect. What's the alternative? Story 36. Knowing a lot of things. Storing a lot of information by studying is not the same as having a high cognitive capacity. Many people, however, consider people who read many things to be intelligent. Story 37. Having a college degree is not a guarantee of intelligence. These days, it's not even a sign of it. It's a sign of being able to afford it. I've worked with literally hundreds of people who possessed bachelor's, master's, and doctorates. Many were intelligent in a fashion, some were legitimately geniuses in their fields, and some were also the dumbest individuals I have ever met. Engineers, scientists, mathematicians, educators, programmers, journalists, artists, military officers, and business people. I've worked with a lot of different folks. Story 38. Talking fast. People think they sound so good when they speed in conversations, but it's just annoying. Story 39. Money. And we need to be really friggin' careful with what the likes of Bezos and Musk are, doing let alone the altruism of Gates. Story 40. Being able to win an argument. Sometimes it just means you're being so aggressive or just delusional that the other person decides to bow out because it's not a constructive conversation. Story 41. Every self-proclaimed highly intelligent person I've met is actually just a mediocre average person who also always happen to be raging narcissists with a superiority complex. Anytime someone says they enjoy Rick and Morty, Elon Musk, and only listen to obscure instrumental, I run. Story 42. An ex-boyfriend was getting his master's when we were dating. I have no idea how the conversation started, but at one point we were talking about the moon. He was super confused when I said something about how we see it because of the reflection of the sun's light. He was in his early 40s and he thought the moon was its own light source. Story 43. Being narcissistic? I've heard people say that narcissist people are very intelligent. I think they are just conniving and spend all their time looking for ways to play mind games with their supply. My ex was a narcissist, but not very intelligent at all, even though he thought he was the smartest person in the room. Story 44. PhDs. A title does not guarantee that the person is intelligent. And for the movie directors in the world, having 3 PhD is not synonym of being intelligent, is synonym of being an underpaid masochist with enough founds to do whatever she likes in life. Story 45. Being overly negative. People usually equate pessimism to intelligence and optimism to naive stupidity. Story 46. Being famous. Gwyneth Paltrow knows nothing about medical treatment, and Tom Cruise knows nothing about psychology, at least not in correcta. Story 47. Neat handwriting. Children are praised at school for neat handwriting. Some of us grow up thinking we are stupid because our stories and poems never made it to the classroom wall because they didn't look pretty. Only as an adult did I realize that the kids, mostly girls, who could form lovely round, even letters, were not geniuses. Story 48. Advanced academic degrees. For the most part, nearly every advanced degree available can be achieved by persons with average intelligence. Degrees are not awarded for creating or discovering new knowledge. Instead, they are given for memorizing and regurgitating already established knowledge. Advanced degrees are a sign of education, not intelligence. I have known people with PhDs in highly specific fields that I seriously wondered how they were able to function in society without eliminate themselves or others due to them being so inept. Story 49. People who tell you they don't suffer fools gladly. That's the clearest sign you will ever receive that you're talking to a moron. Story 50. Having a degree. It shows dedication and education, but says nothing about intelligence. People with degrees have said and believed some very stupid things. Story 51. When people use those buzzwords like intersectionality, patriarchy, heteronormative, and others, all in a sentence, it's usually a response to a question or to a discussion that person doesn't know the full answer to, just saying nothing but saying something to sound smart. Story 52. Using big words to explain simple concepts. I work in EMS, and sometimes it's easier to say the inside portion of the knee instead of the medial aspect of the patella. I get that you need to know it, but sometimes you don't have time to reach back into AP to explain these things. Story 53. Mistaking outspoken confidence with competence. Many words don't equal more accuracy. Talking over someone does not anyone's point more true. Listening is not a sign of ignorance, but can be a greater sign of intelligence. Story 54. Speaking coherently quickly. Being quick to respond to someone and throwing half a dozen non sequiturs back at them makes you look like the smarter person to a dumb person. Story 55. Advanced degrees. I've personally known people who somehow managed to graduate but couldn't pass their licensing exams even after multiple attempts. Story 56. Claiming that the person you're arguing with is stupid for not agreeing with you, falling into verbal manipulation to try and make yourself seem smarter in comparison. That is 100 a sign of juvenile immaturity. Story 57. Having an uncle that went to MIT and asking questions about batteries and sharks that no one else has ever asked. Story 58. Not apologizing, never admitting that you are wrong, pointing out every little mistake that other people make. Story 59. Being famous. Actors, people with money. Everyone thinks that famous people are intelligent because they can read a great-sounding speech that was written for them. Everyone thinks the ultra-wealthy are intelligent, but some of them just inherited wealth. Story 60. Using big words and long, complicated sentences to communicate. The smartest people I know communicate for the listener's benefit and are clear, concise, and don't make others feel stupid having a conversation with them. Story 61. Being the loudest in the room. Many people think those who speak the most have the most intelligence, but really it's the silent ones. Story 62. A university degree. Plenty of educated idiots out there. George W. Bush has a degree and can barely string two sentences together. Story 63. Being contrary in normal conversations. The devil does not need an advocate, and if you do it in normal conversations with friends where it's clearly unnecessary, you really ain't that bright. Story 64. How they use big words in sentences. Congrats, you have a big vocabulary. No need to use it on a simple sentence on a text to a friend. Keep it simple, dumbass. Story 65. Being able to solve a Rubik's Cube. Just follow a tutorial and learn the algorithms. There is no big thinking involved once you know the tricks. Story 66. Overly opinionated people that aren't intelligent, that like to talk really loud and are confidently incorrect 99 of the time. Story 67. Having a PhD, most of the people I knew in grad school barely understood the field outside of their hyper-specific niche, and even then they were absolute dumbasses when it came to anything outside of science, LOL. Story 68. Rote. Lots of scenes in movies where some dude regurgitates rote to show how smart he is. I mean, it is, but the lowest level. Story 69. As an Asian American who has worked in Asia, rote memorization is a cool party trick, but won't get you that far in a career. No problem-solving skills, just memorize. It also contributes to the lowest of EQs and social skills in the world, since they all lock themselves in a room to study. It's honestly not the kids' faults, though. It's how those countries built themselves. Most of them have one test, at 18 years old, that determines their entire life. Story 70. Money or being rich. I'm a general contractor in South Florida. Most of my trade partners are actually smarter than their clients. Story 71. Explaining concepts in a convoluted manner, relying on technical jargon rather than explaining concepts in an intuitive and clear manner. Concepts that cannot be explained in the latter form are the exceptions to the rule, not the rule itself. Story 72. College degrees. Just because you can remember something and write it back down for a test doesn't mean you're smart. Story 73. Having a U.S. neutral accent and demeanor. I live in Appalachia, and people here often get dismissed for looking and talking like country folk. My good friend is an example. She's an old mountain woman, but she has a doctorate in math and many years of experience teaching teachers. There are tons of examples besides just Appalachia. Story 74. So-called giving the facts. Facts don't matter if you don't know how to interpret or integrate information. Story 75. A college degree. Aside from some really difficult subjects, it's just a measure of your ability to attend classes and do the work. Story 76. Using big words when the most correct word is the smallest one. Most common one I hear is yourself instead of just you. Story 77. Being able to nitpick an argument. That doesn't make you clever or insightful. It's intellectualism from the cheap seats. It's intellectual cowardice. It's like thinking you are creative because you can find flaws in every movie or television show. If you want to show people you are intelligent or creative, actually offer something original. An original thought or original piece of work. Take the risk of putting your ideas out there for others to evaluate. Story 78. In TV shows where the smart character has a dozen PhDs, it doesn't make them look smart, it makes PhDs feel insignificant. Story 79. They're symbols of success. Cars, jewelry, cloths, houses. Success if feeling good and at peace with your world and yourself. Story 80. Being able to out-talk someone. A lot of the time, it's a good portion of being able to bullshit, and an even bigger portion of not caring about the subject so they don't get messed up by emotional investment. Story 81. Just because someone went to university does not mean they are intelligent. Also, wearing glasses make you look more intelligent to some because of common misconceptions. Story 82. One thing that definitely isn't a sign of intelligence but often gets mistaken for it is talking a lot. Just because someone can chat endlessly doesn't necessarily mean they're smart or saying anything meaningful. Story 83. The words people use or how they speak. Never let someone fool you into thinking they're smart simply because they're great speakers. Story 84. I'm in the 90th percentile. There's dumb, and then there's not realizing you're actively insulting your intelligence. Dumb. Story 85. Having lots of knowledge does not make you an intelligent person. The ability to memorize is great, but true intelligence lies in how you process that knowledge, make connections between unrelated subjects, come up with solutions, and create new ideas. Even if you don't have access to school or books, you can still use the few things you know in an intelligent way. Story 86. Using words their audience is not likely to understand. Intelligent people don't just know big words, they know when to use them, and more importantly, when to not use them. Story 87. Does Reddit consider being good at math a sign of intelligence? I admire those who are good at math. Being able to memorize facts is not really a sign of intelligence. Critical thinking is. Story 88. A degree of any sort. So many people use their degree as a proof of how smart they are. A degree does show you have further education on certain topics. It, however, does not guarantee intelligence. Story 89. I know it's ridiculous, but having a doctorate, it is a sign that you are good at studying and has no indication of life intelligence. Source. My best mate is a doctor and a fudge idiot. Story 90. Being able to memorize facts and regurgitate them out. Knowing facts isn't intelligence. That's memory. Story 91. Overcorrecting people is not the flex that intelligent people think it is. Of course, it is good to be corrected to an extent, so as that wrong information is not spread around. I'm referring more so to people correcting another's statistic by 2 or 3 with an Well, actually, it's unhelpful and it's counterintuitive.